we've done a lot of reporting here on the State News about what goes on in MSU's Office of Institutional Equity, colloquially known as the Title IX office. But as you've reported pretty extensively on, Title IX is not all they're doing. No, but anyway, we've talked to a lot of people who have gone through that process, survivors of sexual violence, and the decision to report. I think the survivors that we've talked to most extensively have come to regret that. They have not had great experiences with it, and I think a lot of things were surprising to them. Maybe they didn't have a full expectation of exactly what it was going to look like when they did choose to report, or when they were sort of forced into that process by some sort of mandatory reporting. But anyway, so you did some great stories over the last couple of weeks, just kind of helping people have maybe a little bit more information, being more fully informed about what that decision to report looks like. And so I wanted to have you on. You can talk about it. I think it'll be great. Yeah. So first of all, and I think this is the biggest misconception, is that we have a very narrow view of what kind of things can be reported to the OIE. I think people tend to think of purely sexual violence, right? That's the only thing to think about. Right. But it's a lot broader than that. Can you talk the listeners of the 1909 through what's everything that can be reported to the OIE?
Yeah, so it's going to be easier to think of it in two categories. So first of all, you have this Title IX and RVSM. So that's sexual assault, stalking, sexual violence in general, relationship violence, and just misconduct in that variety. You have that, but then you also have the anti-discrimination policy, or ADP. So that would cover, racial discrimination, harassment, different, hate speech. But it's a little bit tricky because with all of these things, there are instances where you might report speech that you perceive as hateful. However, MSU won't end up agreeing with you. They'll say this doesn't violate our policies for harassment. And it just depends on whether it sort of reaches this level of, unwelcome conduct that's, objectively severe, persistent, and pervasive. And MSU is the one who decides that. So generally it goes through those tunnels, but there are exceptions.
Yeah. And so let's say, someone has experienced conduct that they feel victimized by. They want to report it to the OIE. How do you do that?
Yeah, so no matter whether it's under, again, this Title IX, RVSM, or ADP, you can always report it through the Public Incident Reporting Form, I believe it's called. This is all online on their website. And it's just this whole, this form that, fill out, just basically describe on your own your experiences, and then MSU, again, decides what category it falls into, and the process kind of goes from there.
Yeah, and so, process going from there. Talk me through you report, right? You've said this is the conduct that I experienced. What's the next thing that happens? What are they going to do?
Yeah, so MSU's Office of Institutional Equity, OIE, they receive the report. They have an investigator basically look at it and then reach out again to the person who filed it. That person is called the claimant, right? And they ask for more details sometimes. They ask for a little bit of clarification, but the really important thing is that they offer these supportive measures to the claimant. Like, for example, if you have a class of somebody who you've had faced harassment with or something, and you don't want to see them, they can sort of coordinate like moving classes. They can coordinate schedule changes. They can put in no contact directives with them.
So like during the time of the investigation, they can enact some manner of sanctions to ease things even before there's a finding.
Exactly, and this is all. This is before they make any sort of official decision in regards to those things. So the process really starts off with that. At that point, it's up to the claimant to decide whether they want to move forward and go kind of this official route, whether to pursue an investigation into the claims of misconduct, to go through this whole process of having a hearing and then a final decision to see whether they violated MSU's policies officially. And so that is a whole nother process. So
so talk us through, before we get through to kind of results. Right. That when you talk about an investigation, the investigatory process the OIE goes through if you report harassment or discrimination or anything like that, is it, parties are submitting evidence, there's interviews, talk us through, what do you have to do during this process?
Yeah. So the report is going to be referred to an investigator if they decide to go through with it. Then there's more of these interviews. The investigator reaches out to the claimant and they piece together what happens in full. Then the investigator uses information to compile this big report. A formal complaint is what it's called. Once they have that, the claimant reviews and signs the complaint, and I know this is getting kind of bogged down in all of these details. But now the investigation officially begins. Now that they have this signed formal complaint. More interviews, basically, not only with the claimant, but also the rest of the people that involves, the respondent, the witnesses,
the accused, and they use claimant, respondent, sort of legal terminology. I think in more common terms, be kind of accused, accuser,
right. Where the respondent is the person being accused. Yeah, exactly. They have all of these interviews, and then they have a hearing. So. Basically they have this sort of cross-examination, where official, third-party investigators kind of question each individual that's involved in it. They have this, I think I'm blanking on the term, but a credibility.
They'll do a credibility assessment. It's something that we've reported on, where they kind of, a lot of these cases are things that people perceived, things that happened between two people in rooms people weren't in, other people weren't in, and so they do this kind of assessment of who's credible and who's not. And we've talked to survivors who've gone through that process and felt victimized by it. Talked to an expert on the kind of psychology who felt like it was rather unscientific, but that's the process that they use.
Right, that is.
But anyway, Theo, so this whole thing, this process of reporting to, the talking about sanctions, to signing the formal complaint, to the exchange of evidence during the investigatory period, to the hearing, all of this. Can you talk me through how long all of that takes?
Right. So, officially, it provides 90 days to complete the investigation, 60 days for that hearing process, then 38 days to resolve the whole, if somebody decides to appeal, it's 38 days for that. But in total, realistically, we can expect almost about a year of all of this investigation. And, you've talked to survivors, and people have told the state news that that can be kind of triggering to have that prolonged.
Because you're making me do math here, Theo, which is tricky, but 90, 60, was it 10 at the end?
90, 60, 38.
38, that's 180, right? But we know from the actual data that on average it takes 361 days. So they're allowed to extend that period?
Yeah, well, they are, yes. They are allowed to extend it. And part of that, and you reported on this a little bit ago, is that they're kind of understaffed. They have some problems with that, so it takes much longer than what they allow officially. But they can extend everything.
We did some, like you said, we did some reporting over the summer and got a hold of some of these. They had hired outside consultants to kind of diagnose, like, why are these cases taking a year to complete? And they had, just the biggest finding was just understaffing, that the university wasn't hiring enough people to operate this office in a way where cases could go for shorter than a year. And like you said, a lot of the survivors that we've talked to at the state news say that year-long timeline, having to relive these experiences over and over again, can kind of be re-traumatizing, can almost re-victimize them.
Exactly.
Constantly
reminded of these things.
But thank you. It's these stories that Theo's put together. He's put together a couple online explainers that you'll be able to find on statenews.com. Kind of talking through this is a great service for people to know exactly what they're getting into when they're making a decision whether or not to report conduct they experience. So thank you for doing that.